The second item that I have is to do with the 30-year recertification guidelines for the electrical portion. So we're fortunate enough to provide services to a lot of residents throughout the county. Each engineer has, their own discretion. So
there's an item on the agenda which
pertains.
let you finish your sentence before.
Yeah.
But I think you're going down the road of an item that we have on the agenda.
Maybe covered. Let's put.
I just have two questions.
Okay.
Regarding the recertification for dwelling units for electrical. So dwelling units, you have some engineers that don't require it. You have other engineers that require it. The ones that require it go in and conduct their initial inspection of a sample of units, right? They'll go in, if you have 300 units, they'll go in and inspect 30. They'll find deficiencies. The deficiencies have to be remediated. But then, state of Florida only allows either an architect or an engineer to conduct inspections, and that's structural. On the electrical side, I would imagine it's an electrical engineer. So my specific question is, if an engineer, the engineer of record, directs a contractor, can an engineer of record direct a contractor to perform inspections
Inside the unit?
inside the unit?
Okay. John, you want to direct that?
Okay, that's been ruled on by BORA as well, and I believe it's part of the guidelines. So where in dwelling units, in multi-unit buildings, the architect or the engineer has the discretion to seek access to the dwelling unit. But he can't force his way in. He has to allow the occupant to let him come into the unit, is essentially the way the guidelines are set up. So yes, they can go in, but they have to have permission. So it's not like I want to look at all these units, because it's essentially private property.
Based on what you just said, say I'm an engineer, I'm not an engineer, but let's pretend I am for a moment. I'm coming to his unit and I say, I want to look at a sample of units in his unit. Can he tell me no?
Yes.
What I thought. Okay. So you can fire that engineer, or you can tell him no, and you say, man, well, I'm not going to give you what you need unless you do. And you can say, go to the other engineer.
What about, what is a question directly to the board, is what about if that engineer finds a deficiency in one of the units that he sent them? Can he direct the electrical contractor to inspect the rest of the units? And if they're not granted access, then he can't certify that.
Well, that's kind of a decision, in my opinion, between the engineer and the contractor. The engineer was granted access into a unit. He was granted the access. If he finds a deficiency, it's his obligation to address it. He's kind of bound by his license to address it. Okay, but if you never let him in there in the first place, he never finds it. So if the engineer says, I'm not going to certify the building unless you let me in there, then it's time to find a new engineer.
No, my question is that what he was, I think what he was, the point he was getting to is that we do a sample of 10 units in 100 units, and we find a deficiency in 3 of those units. So we direct the contractor to inspect the rest of the 90 units. I think that's what, are we, as a design professional, are we allowed to delegate that inspection process to
Given the
contractor?
fact,
I believe that's your question, right?
Yes.
given the discovery at that moment, now that you know that there's a deficiency, it's incumbent upon the contractor at that point to protect himself. and go in there and for all the units and say, hey, let's check out all these units and fix whatever's not compliant. You know, now that means bring it up to the code that it was built by at that time, not today's code.
Right.
Okay, so if somebody came in there and they put in, I don't know, subpar, unlabeled or unlisted, receptacles that came from, wherever, and you found them, they'd have to replace those, but that doesn't mean that you have to go into the bathroom and put GFIs in all the bathrooms. All right, that's all. All right.
So,
That's not.
Alfonso, would you agree with me then that once we find a deficiency in a building and we pass it on, we report it, and we pass it on to the general contractor, he would have to pull a permit to fix those deficiencies. Now he's responsible for the rest of the building?
This whole thing is problematic. I've said so from the beginning. When it came before the county commission, I was the only living soul in Miami-Dade County who stood up and spoke against it. I don't know where the rest of you were, but I was there. They gave me my 7 minutes, pounded the gavel and told me to sit down and shut up. So I did not get my way. I did not get my way. What I think we should do as design professionals, we have to just say, somebody comes to you and says, do you want to do a 30 or 40 year recertification? Just say no. And then at that point, county commission is going to get the message. And then at that point, we're going to revisit all this stuff and do something that makes sense. Because what's in black and white now does not make sense. With regard to his situation, it's a theoretical question for me because I say no every day, every single day. I will not do what that engineer did because I don't do 40 or 30 year recertifications. But if I took it on and I found 30% of the problems, I would go to my client and I would say, I need this much money to check the rest of it.
I mean,
That's what I would do. I would not put it on him, but that doesn't mean that I'm right. That's just how I would react. And all that is a theoretical answer because as a practical matter, you're never going to be in that position.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with that because we're passing the buck to you. We're making you responsible for the work.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you go into the unit, and you find a deficiency, it's incumbent upon you and the contractor to make those repairs. But if you never go into the unit to begin with, you don't find the repairs, you're not responsible. But it's the discretion, like John said, it's at the discretion of the engineer himself if he wants to go into the unit. But he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to. But I think it's my personal opinion, you should go in the unit. Because a lot of homeowners do and unit owners do strange things.
That's
So
I would say one other thing is that it's not just if the engineer wants to go into the unit. It's if the occupant wants to allow the engineer to go into the unit.
But this,
Go ahead.
but if the engineer puts in the report, 90 more units need to be checked, then you go to the building official and you say, you have right of entry. Let's get on with this.
Yeah.
The building official has right of entry.
Or the building doesn't get certified.
Or the
Or the building doesn't get
Exactly.
certified. Yeah. And then the problem's back to the owner of the building.
So I hope that clears up your. But it clears it up your money thing.
You know, so
What I would like to see is maybe some additional language on the guideline.
Yeah, we all.
Write a letter to every single one of the county commissioners. And I'll help
To your
you
point, we would all like more
draft
guidance on that.
article pros.
Thank you for your time.